Do you ever find a piece of furniture online that looks absolutely incredible, and then you see the price tag and immediately rethink your entire life? Yeah, that was me. I found this gorgeous, chunky, reclaimed style wood table on Etsy for $2,000. And to be fair, I almost bought it because the table in our living room right now sucks. My fiance hates it because it is a pain to clean, and it's got this glass top on it that shows dirt constantly. Plus, it also really doesn't fit with our space at all and is a relic from our old rental house. But instead of dropping $2,000, I did something significantly more chaotic. I went behind my shop and grabbed a pile of old beams that I literally ripped off the front of my house during a landscaping project. And I decided that I was going to try to build the same table for free. And the wild part is, it actually worked. This is how I turned literal construction leftovers into a $2,000 table. Well, this is the state of the wood that came off the front of my house. This stuff is bad. And the whole reason I had to remove it off the front of my house was because our insurance company called it out as being rotten. And that is very, very clear here. But there is still a good bit of usable wood here if we can get rid of this rot. And that is my plan. What I'm going to do here is cut these boards down to size and remove all of the rotten bits and chunks off of them so I can get back to good, usable wood. Now, I decided to start this process by checking how much usable wood was actually left on these beams. And I got about 5 feet out of it, which turns out is perfect for a coffee table. The end dimensions that I'm going for this thing are about 5 feet by 2.5 feet, which will give me a really nice rectangular shape to use as a coffee table. Plus, that's actually larger than the current table that we have, which is going to be a huge bonus. So I marked everything out for measurements and then headed over the miter saw to start cutting everything down to size. Oh, and it's probably a good time to mention that my fiance has no idea that I'm building this, because I'm making it as a wedding present for her, because we're getting married in 3 weeks. So while she's asking me to help plan our entire wedding, I'm sneaking off to the shop trying to build a project that I can't explain to her where I've been gone for hours a day working on. That'll go over well. Then it was time to cut 2 end sections for all of these boards to butt up against and hide that ugly end grain on them. Initially, my thought here was just to have these 2 beams on either side, and we actually ended up changing this idea down the line to make the table look a little bit prettier in the end. So all our wood is cut to size for the tabletop, but now I need to find a way to get all of the paint off of these pieces. At first, I thought maybe I could just sand it off with a palm sander, and I don't think that's gonna work very well. And then I thought maybe I could use a chemical stripper to get everything off, but I'm trying to do this as cheap as possible, and good quality chemical stripper is getting really expensive these days. So I dug through my toolboxes to see if I might have something else that I could use, and I found this bad boy. Now this is a surface conditioning tool typically used on metal and automotive applications, which is the only place I've ever used it prior to this. But this wheel on here is a paint stripping drum. It's specifically meant to get paint off of metal surfaces, and I think it might be able to get metal off of wood as well. Now, instead of just going in blindly and trying to use this on one of my already cut pieces of wood and potentially ruining it, I've got one of the offcuts here that I'm just gonna try and spin this up on and see if it takes anything off the top. Okay, so this actually worked super, super well. You can see a lot of that natural wood grain has been brought back in. As far as I can tell, it didn't really affect the shape or the flatness of the wood really at all. It's literally just stripping all of that paint off. Obviously there is some that's still left in these cracks, but I think that's fine because once this all gets stained, you'll barely even notice it if there is any cracks like this. I'm gonna go ahead and use this and try and strip all of those pieces of wood down to the bare wood again, because this looks super, super cool. This is the exact look that I'm going for with this. I just have a ton of wood to strip now. Let's get to it. Well, that was messy and took about half an hour to get one board completely done. But this looks way better now and is actually usable as a piece of wood for a tabletop. So I'm gonna go ahead and call this process a success. Even though it did reveal a couple extra places where the wood is a little bit weaker, we might have to figure out a way to kind of fill these gaps in, or we'll sand them down, leave them, and call it rustic. Either way, this is a finished piece of wood now that I can put to the side and get working on the other 4 of these that need to get done for the tabletop. Now, something that I am gonna do to try and speed this process up a bit is you can kind of tell that this drum is worn down from its use over the years, and this is what it's supposed to look like. So you can tell the difference right there of how these are supposed to be, and it's definitely a little bit worse for wear. So maybe putting a new drum on here will speed up the process a little bit. New drum is on. Let's get another piece of wood up here and get back to sanding.
And now it was time to turn my shop into a strip club. Not the fun type, but the type where we are just stripping paint off of wooden beams for, I kid you not, 6 hours. It might look really fast in the time lapse here, but getting every single side of these beams stripped down completely was no short task. This took me so long and left a ton of dust and debris literally all over my shop. But it was well worth all of the labor to get this done because, again, we're saving thousands of dollars here, and it actually ended up giving me the end result that was exactly what I wanted for these pieces, which was just raw, unpainted, unfinished, ready to be used wood.
Right, so all of our wood is now sanded down, it's all prepped up, all of the paint is off of it, and I started toying around with the idea of putting a kind of frame around the table rather than just having the raw exposed ends sticking out. So I've got these 2 extra cutoffs from the original beams, and I'm going to try and clean these up and do mitered 45-degree corners all the way around the table to kind of give it like a picture frame look. I don't know if it'll work, but I think it would look really, really cool if I can pull it off. But these pieces have the screws in them from where they were attached to the old part of my house. So we got to start by cutting those off first. Well, here's all of the wood after being processed. It's all stripped. It looks really good. This is the exact look that I'm going for with this table. That nice reclaimed, broken, kind of old school looking wood. I think once we get this all screwed and glued together, it's gonna look awesome. But this is a rough estimate of how big the table will be. It's 5 by 3 currently. And then we're gonna do the mitered corners, which will cut in right here across this section, and then obviously across the bottom section as well. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and get those cut, and then I'm gonna lay all my pieces out to see what the final table might look like. Honestly, thinking back on it, trying to use this old wood that had just been sitting outside for probably 30 years probably was the worst idea I've ever had. This stuff is cracked, warped, and rotted, and honestly is basically the trifecta of the worst wood that you could think to use for a project like this.
So after checking to make sure that everything was going together in the right way, it was time to make the final cuts to get everything to fit here. That just required cutting the ends off of those internal boards and adjusting some of the miters so they fit just a hair better, and then I was able to put the whole table together to see what it would look like for the first time.
So I've got the tabletop completed. All of the wood is cut to size and it is ready to be assembled. But before we actually attach everything together, I've got two problems. The first one being, I don't actually know how to attach together 4x6 material. It is huge, and normal wood screws are not gonna do the job on this project, and pocket hole screws definitely are not the answer here. So I've got to come up with a creative solution to not only hold everything together in a structurally secure way, but also hide all of the hardware, because I don't want a bunch of screws sticking out of this table when it's done. And the second problem is we don't know what color to make this yet. I'm almost ready to assemble it, and my biggest problem is I don't know what color it's supposed to be. So I've got to go ask my fiance in a creative way that she won't know that I'm asking about a table for the living room, since this is going to be a surprise for her. This might be a little bit difficult. Hey, Alexis.
Yeah.
I have a question. What would you say that you have a favorite wood color?
I mean, probably somewhere like that kind of color, or the bean, I guess.
So like a walnut?
Is that the color that is?
Yeah.
Then yeah, so
That's walnutty.
Okay.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Okay.
So now that we've solved one of the two problems and found out that she wants what is effectively a walnut-colored wood stain on this, we can now get the shop cleared out and ready for the next step of the process, which is assembly.
This is my child now. I love it. It is my baby. So now it's time to solve one of my two problems, which is how do you attach together two 4x6 pieces of material? These are thick, big, and otherwise don't really have a great solution of how to get these together, but I've got some ideas that I'm going to test out. So my first idea requires a couple special drill bits here. These are for boring very large holes in wood, and I already have these tools, so they don't count as money. But I'm also going to need one other thing. Now, I've been very lucky to work with a couple of awesome companies over the years, one of them being Bolt Depot, who sent me out a huge organizer of bolts here, and I need a couple big ones for this idea to work. So the idea is to drill a hole here and drill a hole here, and then drill a hole in the end of this and in the side of this. And when you put it all together, you'll be able to slide the bolt down through the hole in, and it'll sit like this, inside of the wood. And then you can drop this nut down, get it on the end here, and tighten it up, and it will compress these two pieces of wood together like that. At least that's the idea. I don't know if this is actually going to work, or if it will just destroy the wood, but we're gonna find out. All right, so here's what we're working with. We got two big holes in the top and two little holes in the sides. Now, I don't know if this is gonna work or not, but we're gonna try and put the bolt through and put the nut through. All right, so getting the nut and the bolt in is easy on this side, but I can't get it down here. So I think we're gonna have to elongate this hole a little bit to give me some more wiggle room here. Ooh! All right, we got the bolt in. Now let's see if we can get the nut hooked on. Okay, first potential problem, I can't actually get my wrench in the hole. That is a pickle. Oh. Oh boy. I have not left myself enough room to get the wrench back out afterwards. Sick. That kind of sucks. Okay, I can learn from that. These pieces are in fact attached quite... Oh. I may have spoke too soon. So even though I've got the wrench stuck in the bottom here, I do want to test the structural integrity of this, and it doesn't... If I really put weight on there, that's not actually holding anything. It's just breaking apart. I don't think this is gonna work. It's creative, I'll go with that, but I don't think this is gonna be the solution. Yeah, see this piece already... Yeah, that's not gonna work, no way. All right, well, at least with that out, I might be able to get my wrench out. Multi-tool to the rescue. There we go. Well, unfortunately, I am no closer to actually getting pieces attached because these are quite heavy, and if they're just tearing out the ends like this, there's no way that I'm gonna be able to use those. So, back to the drawing board. So I was sitting here brainstorming, thinking maybe I could use some deck screws or something like this to hold everything together, but these are way too small for the amount of weight that these are gonna be carrying. And then I realized I might actually have the solution right in front of me from an old project that I was doing a couple weeks ago. We have all these big railway ties that hold together our landscaping on the property, and they were coming loose, so I had bought these super long, like 10-inch long lag screws that I was planning on using to hold all of those together. But when they arrived, they were way too small, and I just decided to pocket them for potentially using on a later project. So this may be our golden ticket of how to hold these together. This is a 10-inch long lag screw, and I think I can send it through one side all the way through the other and just screw these together in a very normal fashion, and not overcomplicate this process at all. Now, in addition to buying these to hold all of our railway ties together, I also bought this to drill pilot holes. Now, this is, I believe, a foot-long drill bit. It's an 1/8" drill bit, which is perfect for these size screws. So what I'm thinking is go basically row by row of the table, use this to drill a pilot hole through one block into the next one, and then send this lag screw all the way through, and then put a little dowel plug on the end here through a 1/2" hole to hide everything inside of the wood.
I was only able to drill about 2 inches at a time before pulling the bit back out because only the first 2 inches of this bit actually has cutting teeth on it. So I would drill 2 inches, pull it out, clean it off, go back another 2 inches, over and over and over and over and over. I hate this thing.
Wow, that is way stronger than the bolt method was. So with one bolt in here, this thing is absolutely rock solid. I mean, it is properly compressing the wood. Everything is held tightly together. All I need now is to figure out a way to plug that little hole, and I should have a 1/2" dowel back over here in my scrap pile, which I do, and what I can do is just take this and hopefully plug that hole. So in theory, all I do is stick this puppy in here and then flush cut it. Now with a little wood glue and some sanding, I think that's pretty good. So the plug method worked, but we all know any good stress test is not a good stress test unless you put it to its absolute limits. So I'm going to start by just standing on this. Right in the middle, nothing. No wiggle, nothing. That is absolutely solid. But I've got something that's really going to push this thing. The old 8-pound sledgehammer. Can it withstand a good old thwack from this bad boy? If it can, I'm going to be pretty confident in putting the whole table together like this. Well, I've missed. I am not an expert at sledgehammering. The old sledge test has revealed a weakness. So with 2 solid hits, basically right where the screw sits, I have in fact bent it. I've bent it. Should we hit it again? I feel like we should hit it again just for fun. Alright guys, listen, I'm gonna be honest with you. I think that this is a little bit of an extreme test. I don't foresee us ever walloping on our table with a sledgehammer. And I can put, 4 or 5 of these screws through to really give everything strength. And before I whacked on it with a sledgehammer, it was doing completely fine. So I think we're gonna run it. I think we're gonna send it like this, and this will be the way that we attach all of our boards together. So let's get assembling. I have 14 days until I get married, and I'm out here hitting wood with a sledgehammer. I'm sure my fiance would much prefer me to be helping with planning the wedding, but sledgehammer wood, it's so much more fun. Alright, before I go bolting everything together, I do want to check one thing, because these bolts actually say that they don't need pilot holes. They're self-drilling. So if I can avoid all the time of drilling the pilot hole and then putting the bolt in, this is going to make this process a whole lot faster. So I've got 2 pretty small cutoffs here, and I'm going to see if I can just bolt these together. I believe the answer to that is yes. Yes, you can drill these together without a pilot hole. Now, if we take these clamps off, nothing should move. one piece of the table. Boy, that is solidly in there. Okay, this thing's gonna be a little bit heavy by the time we're done.
So with that successfully attached, it was time to put the rest of the table together. And I used literally every single one of these lag screws that I had laying around to put this table together as securely as possible. Now again, using this reclaimed wood meant that these pieces were not perfectly flat, and I was doing my best to get them to bend and line up the best that I could, but no matter what, there were still some lips and edges that just would not align the right way, and we're going to have to tackle these with some sandpaper down the line. Now, if I had a hand planer even for this project, it would be great, but I don't, unfortunately, which means that I am stuck using a block of wood to try and hold everything down as I'm putting these screws in.
We now have a fully assembled tabletop that weighs a ton. Oh my God. This thing is like 200 pounds. I'm struggling just to pivot it up like this. Holy cow, that is a monster. I guess I got what I asked for, which was a solid piece of furniture. Well, it's not really furniture right now, it's just a big board. It's a 5x3 board. Thick board, but a board nonetheless. Well, now that the table's assembled, it is time to start sanding the entire thing. Not everything matches up completely flush, and you know, that's what you get when you work with old reclaimed wood like this. It is a little bit warped. If I had a planer, this would be the best time in the world to use it, but sadly I don't, and I'm unlikely to get one anytime soon. So, sanding is the best that we're gonna get. Now that we got the tabletop all screwed together and the dowels are glued in place, it's time to start working on the legs. Now, this is one of those times where I am very thankful that I have kept just about every piece of junk lumber I find, including those that I find on the side of the road. Now, this is a 6x6x12 piece of lumber. And we recently had a house being constructed just down the road from us, and they were literally about to throw this thing away. And I asked them, hey guys, what are you doing with that? And they said, well, it's scrap, we're just getting rid of it. And I said, well, I got a trailer in my backyard, can I come and pick it up? They said, sure, and now I own a 6x6x12 piece of lumber. And conveniently, I think this is going to be the perfect piece of wood to use for the legs of this table. Now, before I tell you exactly what I'm doing for the legs, we gotta get this thing moved over to the miter saw so I can get it cut up. And I have a feeling that's going to be a lot easier said than done. Okay, we got our board all lined up. We've got our saw stop set up right there for the exact measurement that we need. I think at this point, all we got left to do is cut it. And there you go, legs cut and secured, and that is a really rough idea of how this table is gonna end up looking. It definitely needs some sanding to get everything fully leveled here, but once it's in, I mean, we're only about maybe a quarter of an inch off over here, and I can see exactly where it is on this leg. It's the leg's fault, not the table's fault. Alrighty, well, we got a ton more work to do.
So I've decided that I'm not actually happy with how this is coming out so far. Everything is pretty cool, but it's missing some character. And with big pieces of wood like this, I actually have a lot of opportunity to adjust the design a little bit. The guy on Etsy that I'm copying here probably spent a lot of time planning his design, and I'm kind of just improvising. So as improvising goes, I decided to break out an angle grinder and start grinding away and carving the wood out on these legs. And my goal was to give it a more natural look, kind of like a carved log cabin would be, which fits our home a little bit more and definitely goes off of the original style plan here, but I think that this ended up giving it an awesome look.
So here's the table so far. This is all of the wood that we've got. Got the legs carved down, got the table back on our work table for today. And I realized I've got one more problem that I need to solve here, which is how am I going to attach the legs to the table itself? Now initially I figured I'll just use the lag screws that I've been using so far to hold everything together, except I only have 3 of them left. And I believe in order to do this properly, I would need about 8, if not at least 4 of them. So I don't think the lag screws are going to be the solution here. But while I think about a creative solution to get the legs attached to the table, I have a ton of sanding that I need to get done on this because not everything is perfectly flat. For instance, over on these corners, we have a little bit of a lip right here that I'm just going to sand down flat and make it a little bit more comfortable when you're using the table. So a little bit of 80 grit sandpaper is going to clean that right up, and then we're going to go over the entire table with 80 grit, then 120 grit, then 240 to get it nice and soft.
Now, sanding is probably the most time-consuming part of any woodworking project, at least as far as I've found. This is my second largest project I've ever done, and every single time it seems to require more and more sanding. But I think if I'm going to be doing more woodworking projects like this, it might be worth investing in something better, because when I watch other woodworking videos on YouTube, it seems to go by so quickly. And I don't know if that's just YouTube magic or if it's better tools, so let me know in the comments below. Is sanding always a huge pain, or does it get easier?
Well, we got everything sanded up and it's nice and smooth and buttery now. I don't know if buttery is the right word for wood, but it definitely feels good and I'm not afraid of getting a splinter when I'm touching this thing. Now, while I was sanding it, I realized that I might have been overthinking the whole how do I attach the legs situation with big lag bolts and steel braces and all these other ideas that I had. And then I thought, hey, what's the strongest structure that we have on Earth right now? And the simple answer to that is the humble triangle. Now, I have all of these cutoffs from when I did the mitered edges on the boards that frame the tabletop. And these triangles are probably the perfect way for me to attach the legs back to the tabletop. So we got the leg, and we got the tabletop. This is actually the bottom of the tabletop, the table bottom. All we have to do is put the triangle right there. Then we take another one, and we put it right there. And then we put some nice 3-inch screws straight through here and into the bottom of the table, and that should hold everything together. Now all I need is 4 of these, but I do need to make sure that they are at a perfect 90-degree angle so that when we attach everything together, it holds those legs at a perfect 90 to the bottom of the table. So we're going to take these over to the miter saw and give them a nice little trim to make sure that these are perfectly 90 degrees before we go installing them on the bottom of the table. So here's the final concept, used from the same wood that the tabletop is made out of, so just continuing the whole recycling concept. So this is how our table is gonna look, you know, just you flip it upside down. There you go, this is how our table's gonna look. Well, that wasn't too bad. And now, with the tabletop separated and sitting over there, it's time to get into the fun part of this build. The transformative part, the part where we get to make things colored. Now, God bless her soul, my fiance wants a walnut finish table, and boy, I have just the thing for that, which is a walnut Minwax wood finish stain. Now, step one of the staining process is getting all of the fine dust off of this wood. And I'm just using a tack cloth in order to do that. Now, the tack cloth is kind of sticky and will pick up little pieces of dust and debris that might otherwise still be stuck on the wood from the sanding process. And this just makes sure that our stain is going to adhere a whole lot better. Now, I think a lot of people would probably assemble the table before staining it, but I want to make sure it gets in every nook and cranny. And I've done calculations, and this table weighs 230 pounds with all of the wood that's included in it. So I don't particularly want to try and move that around while I am staining it, especially since stain has a tendency to drip and otherwise end up in places that you really don't want it to end up. Now, I'm going to save this tack cloth for later, because it's the only one I have left, and I'm not keen on going to the store and having the only money that I spend on this project being tack cloths.
So with all the dust removed, the next step of the process is to wipe everything down with a pre-stain conditioner. This helps the stain absorb much more evenly into the wood and gives you a much finer finish at the end. I've never done a woodworking project without this stuff because I don't trust stain on its own, so I don't know exactly how well or not well it actually works, but it is highly recommended to use stuff like this on professional applications, and because I want this table to look like a real piece of furniture, I'm gonna use it. And yes, even the braces for the legs are getting the exact same treatment and stain and final finish, so everything looks as crisp as possible. Then once the conditioner has set into the wood and had a chance to pop the grain a little bit, you hit it with some sandpaper to make it nice and smooth again, and then it's ready for stain. Now, staining pressure-treated lumber is a little bit finicky because it has that greenish undertone to it, and even though the stain absorbs into it, that green definitely affects the final color. So I actually mixed in a little bit of red mahogany pigment to the stain that was going on the pressure-treated pieces, just to even out that greenish hue a little bit and bring it up to the same color that everything else on the table is going to be. And this actually ended up working out perfectly in the end, as you'll see shortly.
So while the legs and braces are finishing up getting stained, it's time for me to tackle the tabletop. And I've never done a piece this big before, so I'm a little bit worried about how the staining process is gonna go, but there's no sense in waffling about with this, so it's time to just start.
So we're gonna start the process off as usual, using the tack cloth to get all the dust off.
Look at this thing, look at all that dirt. That is all of that invisible dust that it picked up off the table, well, and also the legs, but mostly the table surface just now. That is gross.
Then the conditioner coat goes on, dries, and gets sanded again. And then finally, it's time to lay this beautiful stain down on the table. And I'll let you guys just enjoy this time lapse of the stain going on.
It's been 24 hours and the tabletop is all stained up and the legs are all stained up. Everything except the bottom of the tabletop is stained and now ready for polyurethane. Now I've got about half a can of polyurethane left here in a satin finish, which is exactly what I want because it'll match all of the other custom wood furniture that I've made for our house to date. I just hope that it's enough because, again, I'm trying not to spend any money on this. So if I have to spend money on urethane, that's going to be kind of annoying. This is going to be our first of probably 3 layers, and I will sand lightly in between each one to make sure it smooths out. And then we should have a nice, beautiful final finish on this table that will make it look like a professional piece of furniture.
Applying polyurethane is probably my favorite part of any woodworking process, just because it is the final pop that this wood needs to really bring that color out. It makes the wood just look absolutely beautiful. And it's a very kind of meditational, calm part of the project where you're just slowly applying this in thin layers over and over and over and over until you get that final beautiful finish. So I started with the legs and then moved to the braces and then finally over to the tabletop where we brought that color beautifully out of the top. And this is finally starting to look like the table that I had always imagined for this space.
Well, our first coat of polyurethane is down and starting to dry. Now this is basically just sealing the wood. If you look really closely, you can still see a lot of that texture on the wood there. And that's gonna go away with a couple coats and some sanding in between. That's why we sand every single coat, just to make sure that those little fuzzies go away. But the legs are looking really, really good. The brace blocks are looking really good. This thing is gonna come together so nicely. I was super nervous about sealing this layer in because once the urethane goes on, there's really not a lot of going back. And I've been saying that throughout this whole build of this not going back thing. And I think for me, a lot of this project is working on my own confidence and knowing what I'm doing instead of just feeling like an amateur 99% of the time. Even though I am, you know, it's good to be confident in your work and be sure that what you're doing is the right thing because you've done it many, many times. Now, this is only the second time that I've done a build at this level, so I don't really blame myself too much for being a little bit nervous, but I think it's coming out really nicely, and I am excited to see this once it's dried.
So I let the first coat dry for 24 hours, came back, sanded it, recoated, sanded it again, recoated it again, and repeated the process 4 times. And after all that work, this table was looking absolutely gorgeous. I could not be happier with how this was coming out. But then I realized that I still had an entire surface of the table that I still needed to finish. So before I can call this complete, let's go ahead and get that done.
This is the bottom of the table, and we still have to sand everything here. We have to stain it all, and then we're only gonna do probably 1 or maybe 2 layers of urethane on the bottom here. My thought process is on the bottom of the table, it's not gonna take as much wear and tear, but I do still want it to be smooth enough so that if somebody runs their hand along the bottom, they're not getting chewed up by splinters or wood or anything else. So let's hit the bottom with the sander, get some of this polyurethane drippage off the bottom, and then we'll get it pre-stained, stained, and then hit it with urethane again.
And I'll go ahead and speed through this process for you guys because you already know the deal of what we're doing here. But I did realize as I was doing this that there's no way that I'm going to be able to get this onto a dolly without some help. So I secretly had to ask Alexis to come help me move this onto a furniture dolly without exposing what I was doing. And this is how that went.
What's this?
It's a new workbench that I'm working on. I need you to help me move it on here.
How heavy is it?
It's like 150 pounds.
Okay.
You got it?
Yep.
Okay. Great.
I'm kind of annoyed that you're using it for workbench.
What do you mean?
Because it would look really pretty.
What do you mean it would look really pretty?
Oh, you're wasting out a workbench. It would be really pretty elsewhere.
Where else would we even put something like this?
I don't know. It looks fun. It looks pretty.
Okay. Bye. Have a good day at work.
Thanks.
She stepped directly into my trap. Now I know that not only does she think that this table is pretty, but that she would love it to be somewhere else other than being used as a workbench in my shop, which is perfect because it was never going to be a workbench in my shop. So now it's time for me to transport this thing piece by piece into the house and get it assembled so I could see it for the first time in its finished space.
These are the last pieces going inside for the table, and then we get to assemble it.
Now to begin the assembly process, I had to drill pilot holes for our 3-inch lag screws that are going to hold the braces to the table. I figured it's a lot easier to assemble this thing in the house than to move 230 pounds, so I'm doing a little bit of precision woodworking on my kitchen counter here. Then it was time to get the table officially assembled. I started by getting the tabletop up on top of the legs, then made some minor adjustments to make sure that the legs lined up exactly where I wanted them to be, and then I screwed in the braces to hold everything together. And then I got to step back and take a look at this thing in my house for the first time.
I can't believe that this was literally wood that was just rotting away on the front of our house not literally 2 months ago. And now it's a table in my living room. Now, all I have to do is wait for Alexis to get home from work and surprise her with the table sitting here. Personally, I think this is going to put me in the running for Husband of the Year, but, you know, if not, then at least it means that I'm a guy who tried really, really hard. But honestly, she deserves something special. And in our family, if you can make it yourself instead of just buying it, it means a ton more. Okay, I think I just heard her pull into the garage. I got the camera set up. Hopefully we get a solid reaction on camera when she sees this thing.
Hi.
Hi.
Why are you staring at me?
I got a surprise for you.
What? What is that?
It's our new table.
I mean, and is this the table that you were building?
Yeah.
The top
The one that I said was a workbench? Yeah. It was actually for this the whole time. That's what I've been doing for the last like 3 weeks.
For real?
Yeah.
This looks awesome. This looks exactly like the one that I was wanting.
That was the goal.
I love this. This is so This is so cool.
You like it?
Yes, I love it.
You remember when I asked you about like your favorite color of wood?
Yeah.
That's why. You remember those beams that we took off the front of the house?
The rotten ones.
Yeah.
That's these?
Yeah. Same wood.
Huh. I'm assuming cutting the rotting pieces out.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I'm impressed. Very impressed.
You like it?
It looks really good. I get to split. Now you have to build me a side table.
A side table? They're never happy.